Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Jill Carter, aka Jilly Pinelli, aka Kamikaze Manager. You can find me at the shop selling the shit out of the books of the two guests we have today, Tana and Kristen. Today we're talking about cycling between indie and mainstream publishing, and you know what that means exactly is, like, indie, like self-publishing or Kickstarters and things like that, and then moving into like larger publishing houses like, I don't know, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Scholastic, like you folks have done. And I just want to ask, first of all, ask you guys to kind of like, talk about like how you first got into publishing and how you moved into those like larger like publishing houses. But what did you do first? Does anyone want to go first? Tana, Kristen?
Kristen, I'm interested in learning how you got into comics. I know my story.
Well, for me, it's just that I always really like to write and I like to draw. It wasn't, I mean, I really loved manga, but I hadn't really read like American comics at all. But I was like, conceptually, comics like check off multiple things from the like what I enjoy doing. So I started like doing web comics when I was in college, and I got really, really into it, but I'm still figuring things out.
That's how H Girl began, right? But
that was years later. Like before that, I was just like making really bad Naruto ripoff web comics and like doing badly in college because I got so into it. And then I stopped because I decided to like career, and was sign calling to me. And so then when I was like an adult, I hopped right back into webcomics because I remembered it from like, the early 2000s. Misfit of Sounds.
Nice.
You're
glitching a little
to the
bit.
world. Oh, sorry. I kind of just very randomly one day decided to make a webcomic and kept doing it for like 5 years.
What platform did you use? Like, how accessible was it? Was it like pretty easy to just kind of get started?
Well, there was a lot of figuring things out, but I had won a voucher for a comic making class. So in that class, they like randomly taught us like how to do it. So that was pretty auspicious. It was like very lucky on my part that I just randomly had this comics class at the Art Students League. But yeah, it was just one of those things where like obviously there is like a big hurdle to learning how to make comics and like put them out, but it's the kind of hurdle where a little bit of Googling will tell you almost everything you need to know. Like, oh, here's how you make a website. Here's how you print your books. So it's just one of those things that the only way to learn is just by doing it. And,
Yeah, that's how I started too. I self-published my first graphic novel, Duck, which was about lesbians in Boston because I was a lesbian in Boston. And I had wanted to read, I was very into comics, but there wasn't a lot of content that were stories that I wanted to read. And so my beginnings in comics came from this need to see my experience reflected. And I had been sort of consuming, Dykes to Watch Out For and everything by Alison Bechdel. And there are some really great, zines and queer comics and stuff that have been sort of like indie and punk and underground stuff. But none of it really like resonated with me. I was consuming a lot of it, but like it wasn't the story I was looking for. And so out of that absence came my first stories, right? Like the first comics that I made. And then I've always wanted to be a storyteller. I'm good at drawing. And I was like, I can figure this writing stuff out. And that's how I began.
Yeah. So where did you go to like find like works like that? Like I grew up in like the woods, so I didn't have a comic shop. I bought comics at like the grocery store.
Yes.
Funnies. Were there like places or people that like kind of like put them in your hands?
A little bit. So my college library, I went to college at Simmons College in Boston, which is now Simmons University, and it is in the heart of Boston, which is a college city. It was across the street from the MFA. It shares a wall with the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It is, 20 other colleges. So there were a lot of people my age, a lot of queer people, a lot of people in the arts that knew things I did not know. And so when I started getting plugged into a community of people, they were like, there's a book I don't recommend. I don't not recommend it, but I'm not here to recommend it, called The Homicidal Lesbian Terrorist. Oh my God, you guys. And I was like, this can't be it. I'm glad that this exists, but this can't be all that, like, this can't be it, right? And anyway, so I got a lot of, this is how I was first introduced to the work of Howard Cruz and the Wendell series and Stuck Rubber Baby, and Alison Bechdel had just been working on changing graphic novels by writing her, it's an autobiography, right? The Fun Home, it's an autobiographical, a memoir, that's the word I'm looking for. And so she was doing all this stuff. Yes. And at the time, I'm in college and I'm like, what is my future going to be? And it was a very exciting time because for the first time ever, a graphic novel wins Book of the Year, not Best Graphic Novel of the Year, but Book of the Year. And of all books, and it was this Fun Home. It was this, revolutionary book, and so I was like, oh, this is a thing I could do. I could do this thing, and so I started doing the thing, and I ended up self-publishing 2 volumes of my Duck book. The first one won the Queer Press Grant, which was so encouraging for me as a young artist because suddenly I had this validation that I wasn't just, you probably feel this too, shooting blind, like you're just in the woods trying to figure it out and trying not to suck, you're trying to do the kind of work that you think you can do, but the early stages can be rough. And so I just self-published stuff until I got picked up, and the rest is history.
That's really awesome, because kind of what you're talking about getting like, you need some form of like early validation to get you to keep going with what you're doing.
Yes.
And that's something I always thought was really special about webcomics, because you can have 3 pages of a comic total, but you can just put it out there and be like, hello world, how is this? And maybe in the beginning, you don't have that many people looking at it, but you'll at least get a couple of people coming in and giving you their thoughts, speculating on where you're going. And for me, like that feedback loop, I don't know if that's the right term, like, but just like getting feedback and being like, this feedback motivates me to make more, is really what helped me stick with making comics. Because once you move into being like professionally published, then suddenly it's like you have to wait like if you're doing single issues, you have to wait every 24 pages and then like 3 months and then show the world what you did. So the instant gratification is not there anymore. So like I wouldn't have been able to like stick it out with comics in that method, like if I hadn't done web comics first. And like
that is so funny because our experiences are so different. I created art in a vacuum in like a dark room alone and no one ever saw it. And then I like finished a book and then people saw it. And then, so like my path has been faster and faster, like being able to do a monthly comic and then a month later have people be talking about it seems very fast for me.
I need really instant gratification.
Were there any like drawbacks to like working like either like working independently, like in your like dark black cave and or putting things like just out there on the internet? Were there any like kind of negative criticisms that you had to kind of deal with, like develop a thick skin for, or anything like that? Like just to kind of like demystify the process, like it's not always like sunshine and rainbows and your cool queer community, your webcomics and Naruto web. But I don't know, I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, definitely there were well, I would take it with a grain of salt. If sometimes you'd get a comment where you're like, you don't get what I'm doing at all, like, or you're being a little rude. But on the whole, I was always like, well, if someone's going out of their way to read my comic, I'm not gonna like hold it against them. Although there was like one person once that I blocked his IP because he kept writing weird stuff, and I was like, this is my own website. I want my space to be my happy space.
No, man, like when I was first creating my comic, I was doing it during my day job. I worked in a mechanics garage, and so I'd be making comics while I was at my day job, and I had a very supportive environment for that. It was a weird situation, but it was wonderful for me. But so I very much worked outside of comics, making comics, knowing nothing about the comics industry or how to get into it or what to do. My plan was just make a thing and put it out in the world, right? Like that was my plan. That was all that. And I was like, show that you can finish a thing, make a complete story, learn as much as you can on the way. That was, I was trying to be very methodical about it. And it ended up paying off in the end because I am making comics for a living. But when I took over Silk, when I was working on Silk for Marvel, never has being a woman on the internet making art been as miserable an experience. The trolls come out, man. And, for me, the block button is my friend. I understand that there are people in this universe who are going to have strong negative feelings about me on site, right? Like they're just going to, oh, I might lose my power, you guys. We're having a bit of a tropical storm in Florida right now. So yes, so the block button, and I had a lot of trolls, and I don't know, I don't need you in my timeline. Get out of here, get a job.
Oh my God.
Now that you both have been published by Dark Horse, Marvel, Scholastic, do you find is it just worse with criticism? Do you have a harder time or an easier time dealing with responses, or feeling like you have to respond to everyone? Is everyone kind of asking you for shit all the time?
Well, first of all, knock on wood, I've never been harassed like that, and I'm so sorry if that happened to you. I feel like it's when you work for the big two, you get put under a microscope.
Yeah, the big two, DC and Marvel.
Yeah, the big two DC. So one of the things that I think people did not expect was the solidarity that I experienced with the other women working on the book. So Stacey Lee is a dear friend. I love the hell out of her. All of the women that worked on Silk, we have the Silk Squad, right? We support and encourage and uplift each other. And my style is very different than Stacey Lee or Veronica Fish or Irene Strachalski or any of the people that worked on Silk. We have our own individual creative voices. I look different than they do, but I fucking love the way Stacey draws, and I love the way that they interpret this character. So if that's not for you, that's okay. If my work isn't for you, that's okay. But it isn't a competition between me and the other artists. We all love the same thing. The fandom loves the same thing, and we express that love. I work really hard to do my best work. And so people that come in and are, I don't know, trying to create fights between, it's just, I don't know, it's not for me. But it is definitely a big two thing in my view.
Yeah. Well, one thing I really appreciate about the both of you, I can't believe that you guys haven't met before, because I've interacted with the both of you through in-person LadiesCons, in the
back when we used to do those, remember, guys?
And both have this overwhelming positivity that is I don't know, it's very refreshing, and you just want to hang out and talk. You're very down to do that. So thank you for that, for just being cool personalities in, a world of shit.
Yes.
Thank you.
We need your art, and we need your life. I was going to ask, did at any point, when did you get an agent? When did you do that? When did you feel like you had to?
Here's my question to you, friend. Do you have an agent? Because, oh my God, I need to get an agent.
I do have an agent, but I got an agent way late in the game, after I'd already had a 2-book deal with graphics and my Dark Horse book was out. Basically, I was at Comic-Con and I was like, it was one of those things in the back of my head, because weirdly in comics you don't need an agent, but it's helpful because all they do is they get you more money, which is huge, because unless you're the kind of person who can just be who can hardball by yourself and be give me more money. But it's nice to have an agent to to do it for you, so you can just do your own thing. But like, you really don't need one. In like regular book publishing, you do, because the queries always come from the agent, but it's a little bit more like the Wild West here. And so what happened was, I was at Comic-Con once a few years ago, and this agent came up to me and he's like, you probably have an agent, right? And I was like, no, I need an agent. And he was like, oh, okay. That's how I found my agent, Jason Yarn, who's actually really great. He's really
so
good.
Surprised.
No, it's just surprising because it fell into my lap so easily. And usually when things are that easy, you're like, why did I take the easy route? But in this case, I was like, that was easy. And it's been working out really well because he knows like a lot about contracts and stuff and like lawyers things that I don't understand. So yeah, but it's one of those things where, especially when you're beginning, no one expects comic people to have agents.
Yeah, I think I have, well, a couple of things going for me. I have a good head on my shoulders, and I have friends who are contracts lawyers. And so if I ever got tripped over I read my contracts, I negotiate my contracts, but I have arrived at the stage. This is now the 4th or 5th conversation I have had since LaGuardia, the last graphic novel that I worked on. It might not be the last one. The one of the graphic novels I worked on this year was LaGuardia, and it won the Hugo and the Eisner Award. And now I have, guys, behind the scenes, my Eisner Award just showed up. I did a panel earlier today with LadiesCon, and then on lunch.
You're not going to bring it out? Are you not going to bring it out?
It's right here.
Not right there. It's right there. That's amazing. Yes.
It just showed up like now. It just showed up today between panels. So I did this thing, and and it won all these awards, and now it's like very late in the game for me to be like, I should probably have an agent. So yes, you can get quite far, friends in the audience, without one, but maybe start to cross that bridge a little earlier than I did.
Do you talk to any other like creators? It's like, how do you demystify this whole process in such a volatile industry? It's very volatile. It's a weird, comics publishing is it's unlike any other publishing industry.
Yeah.
Like, do you talk to other creators and just be like, what should I ask for? Or like, what did you do? Like how important is that to you? Or are you just kind of barreling through and like seeing what sticks and what seems good?
I feel like I always talk to people about this stuff. I mean, I gauge their comfortability with it, and, I'm not trying to make anyone have a conversation that they don't want to have, but I think it's really important to demystify it, to talk about page rates, to talk about royalty structure, to talk about contracts, to talk about what, failed, this particular person, what is their big gripe about, what was the worst contract experience you had, what was. And people, if you're in comics long enough, usually you have a horror story at a certain point. And so I tried to apply all those cautionary tales to my own life and be as diligent and, and also as forthright as I could be when evaluating these things. But it's really murky. There was a conversation online about recently about book contracts, like the first book contracts and the way that it differed for women, for people of color, for first authors and multi-books and all this stuff. And it was really I seek those kinds of things out because I think it's important information for me in this industry to have.
Yeah, would you assume that like a bigger publisher would be like have their shit together, like offer you a fair contract, like offer you fair rates, like you'd think so? It's like, but yeah, no, like not at all.
Sometimes not.
Sometimes not. Sometimes you have to be like, no, this is what I'm worth, right?
Yes, and the biggest fights the big houses are the ones that I think, I don't know.
You're still.
What do you think about this, Kristen?
All right, let's not like.
No, I totally know what you mean. I'm not the kind of, one of my personality flaws is that I don't ask people for help. So I'm the kind of person, well, it's okay. I manage. I get through things. But I always just am like, I'll just figure it out. It doesn't occur to me to ask people for help. Yeah. So, but I will give people help if they ask me for help. But
let me recommend that, that was also a hurdle I had to get over in my younger days, and my life is infinitely better now by asking people who are better at this stuff and who deal with it all the time. And, you know, I have now, for a long time, I didn't have any friends in the creative field. I had only like, you know, people that had like normal jobs. And so they would be like, oh, you do comics, end of discussion. That's cool. They would add nothing to it because they don't know anything about it. It's not their universe. And over the last few years, I have been building up a community of creative people that do all sorts of different things. You know, I have cosplay friends and game designer friends and lawyer friends and, you know, all of these things that, you know, and my door is open to them and their doors open to me. And so use those contacts, I think. You know, ask your friends for help, ask your friends for advice. You don't have to listen to it, but it's nice to get another perspective.
I definitely had a point with one of the things I worked on where I got this deal and I was so excited and I was very new to comics.
Yeah.
And I looked at the amount they were offering me and I divided it by how many pages it was. And I was like, this is so little money. This is so little money. And I then thought, this is so little money that I must be reading this wrong or doing the math wrong. So I took it and then I was like, I'm so poor right now.
Oh, no. So that's your horror story.
My horror story is one that I totally brought on myself by just didn't trust my instinct, which was like, it was something like $50 a page for everything from writing to inking, coloring, lettering.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Whatever.
See, this is why we do this.
This is why, yes.
So that's why you ask people, because someone be like, no. Make sure you get paid, because while you're working on that project, you still have to pay your rent and you won't have time to do other things because you're
and if you're doing everything, writing and drawing and coloring and inking and doing all of the things, you're also going to need probably some rehab for your hand when you break it.
Absolutely.
And, so physical therapy is also an expense, I guess.
This is true.
Oh my goodness.
I know. It was also hard because it was the kind of thing where they give you a big check right at the beginning and then like a year later they give you the rest. So and I'm like, I was maybe a little excited with my big check, and so I spent a bunch of money and then was
no.
What did I do?
Oh, so you actual zygote, you baby. Oh, but hey,
you learn by doing.
That's how you do it. Here we are.
One question I have is like, did the way that you folks like make your comics change? Like the way that you like just sit down and do it change when you moved from publishing yourself or doing Kickstarter or webcomics or any of those kind of like, what would I guess be considered like self-publishing and indie versus a mainstream publisher? Like, is the mode different? Are your goals different?
My process has evolved from the very beginning. So I am, as I learned so early, the way I first made my very first book and the way I'm making books now has evolved. There are some things that are the same, working on layouts, doing sketching, but now I've incorporated digital elements. I do a lot of my layouts digitally. I find that works really fast. I still ink traditionally. I like the feel of like, I don't know, brush on paper, pencil on paper. But to get the angles right, to get the, the underneath, the sketching, the camera angles, all that stuff, I find laying it out digitally is just the way it works for me. But my style is always evolving, right? Like I'm plugging other things in and sort of streamlining the process and finding new things to explore creatively. That's what it's like for me.
For me, it changes from book to book. I'm even like halfway through books, I'll change my methods because I just can't help it. I just have fun, like thinking of like, I'm like, someday I'm going to find like the holy grail of like the fastest, best way to make a comic page. Like I used to just draw a page without doing a layout and seeing what would happen and not planning out how many panels to do.
Yeah.
Not the best way of doing it.
Oh my God. And then everything you're saying is giving me hives.
And then I actually did a couple pages, and this is pretty fun, where I would sketch out what I wanted to be on the page, like just random doodles, and then I would scan that or like take a picture with my phone and then import that and like turn that into a layout. And that's a fun way of doing it sometimes. It is a little like counterintuitive if you want to have like the sort of each panel to like have, you know, work as a whole, because sometimes it doesn't really look nice that way. I did a book with nib pens, like dipping ink and stuff.
I have friends who still ink traditionally, and I am always amazed.
I always ink. That's the one thing I keep the same. I did a couple.
Do you use nibs the whole time, or do you paint with ink, like brushes and quill and the whole thing?
I got my microns.
Nice.
Oh, I have my carpal tunnel grip. On
my nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I like the Tombow Fudenosuke pens.
Oh,
and the Posca paint pen. This is my savior.
Right.
It has a tiny tip and whiteout.
Oh man, this is, I'll do mine next because I love this. What do you use for whiteout?
I usually use Posca paint pen. I have a thicker one too, and then I also have just like a jar of white deleter paint that I use when I truly ruin my page. Another thing I like to do, and this is to keep on track, because sometimes I do get distracted and procrastinate. So I have this little timer, and I'm like, when I'm starting, I'll set a timer for like 15 minutes, and I'll be like, for the next 15 minutes, you have to work like super well and not think of it. It's like a meditation thing.
You and I do work opposite. Like I cannot, what you're saying is so alien to me. This is so fascinating. My favorite pen, I will pencil usually with colored pencils like this one. It's, got a blue body, but it's like the colored inks, the pencil lead is different colors. And then I usually ink with things like this zebra brush that you can get off Jet Pens. And it's got a little brush nib on the end. And so I can vary the line weight. I also use microns. And then for spotting blacks and bigger areas, I have like a double-sided brush pen as well. You can get all this stuff on jetpens.com. I love them. And then I don't have one right here with me, but the whiteout pens I love the best are Signo, Signo, and I think they're Uniball, but it's the best whiteout pen, man. Oh, and it goes on smooth, it dries pretty flat, and you can ink over it, and it doesn't like break apart the way that, whiteout or whatever might. So anyway, those are the things that I use, and I love them.
Okay, I wrote down Signo because I am on a quest to find the best whiteout pen. It's truly like hard because it can turn crackly and gross. But actually, I do it kind of similar because I do some pencils with a light blue pencil, and I usually like print out. This is like an example, and hopefully this is okay that I'm showing this. But like, this is a page I'm like a quarter way through.
That's small. What is the size that you're working? Is that 11 by 17? That isn't.
No.
Tiny.
This book is smaller, and I am behind. So I was like, I'm going to scale down. So what I do is I do a 2-page spread on a 11 by 17 paper. This is only for this one book. My other books, I do it all totally different. And then I cut the paper in half. Yeah, no, I mean, this way seems to work for me fine. But yeah, like I usually I've been for the past like 6 months or so, I've been doing like really tight pencils on my iPad and then printing it in light blue and then inking over that.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's really like helpful because sometimes you're like, I drew this face so perfectly, but it's 5 times too big for the body that it's on. And you're like, oh, look, I can just make it smaller. Rather than just like crying.
Yep.
And being
able
like,
to manipulate. Yeah. Being able to manipulate the early sketch sessions has been life-changing. And, it's just sort of made me a better storyteller. And I love it. I just love it.
I have a question about, this is great, like process discussions, and I'm loving it. But in just to kind of like steer it back, like creative freedom versus constraints. Like, does that like help you? Does that hinder you when you're like sitting down and like drawing or writing when it comes to working in like a more when you have a project like given to you, or you have a creative property that is like not your, like doing like silk or doing like Minecraft.
Yeah.
So like, what are those
There,
like pitfalls, and is it sometimes a relief not have to worry about it as much?
I don't think there are some artists that are really, really great at likenesses. I did one issue of Star Trek where it happens in the Kelvin universe, and I needed to be sure that like I got what the characters looked like based on what the actors were that played them in the movies. And that can be a little challenging. It can also, you know, you can have fun with it. I think over the long term, that would be a bad fit for me because I would feel too constrained by it. But when I worked with Silk at Marvel or on Black Panther, I was really lucky. My editors are fantastic. And the things that we wanted to do in the book, we got to do, right? Like I got to have an interracial lesbian wedding with an on-screen kiss in the Marvel universe and got zero blowback about that. So, right? Like, so, you know, my experiences have been great, and I don't know.
Horrible, but that's amazing, but yeah.
Right? Like, and I'm like, I feel like we got away with something, and Robbie's like, no, it was in the script. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it does kind of depend on the company you're working with and like the editor that you have. But for me, Minecraft is the only book that I've done that it's like a, what's the word? It's like a property and like an IP or whatever. Yeah, licensed book. So everything else I've done has just been me just making crap up. And like I'm like, I'm not even setting this on Earth because it's gonna be set on like something that looks like Earth, but all the cities have different names. That way you can't tell me that something is wrong because it is that way in this world. So I like freedom and I don't like constraint.
Oh,
but usually freedom comes with the smaller publishers and constraint comes with the bigger publishers, especially if you're doing kids stuff, because they're like, let's not traumatize the children or teach them bad life lessons. So there's like a slight responsibility there. Like,
like Minecraft and children, and then like Black Panther and Silk, even like you're drawing like new comics, like new readers from the mainstream into your comics. I get to like, you know, hand a kid, you know, like the Minecraft comic because like kids would just like read any Minecraft comic. And you know, like more and more people want like more like Black Panther comics.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Like absolutely. So like that's all, like that's great for me to, because like I know you folks, I love your work. I love to, you know, like hand sell it. And it's great to just be like, oh, you like Black Panther, read this one. And you can, like you can push those things. Do you find like, you know, different people that you wouldn't expect like interacting with your work? You know, now that like you've done, you know, more mainstream, you know, like licensed properties or like, you know, famous superheroes.
Do you have an answer for this, Kristen?
For me, I never know, like, you know, you can't tell who's reading your book and who's liking it. So whenever someone's like, oh, I love your book, I'm like, oh, it's a kindred spirit. So part of me is just like, this person's probably like me, like deep down inside. So for me, I just assume that it's people who like have the same hangups as me. And sometimes that's like a 60-year-old man, and sometimes that's like a 9-year-old girl. And I'm like, okay, we're all one human race. So actually to me, that's been really cool because there is nothing like that there's nothing in common with like the readership. And it's neat to see that because kind of makes you feel like not as alone in the world or whatever. Aww. You know, like they're like, oh, these people like relate to my issues that I just like vomit on the page here.
Yeah, man, the stories are all about connecting and I don't know, creating connection. And I like that there's a level of powerlessness about who connects with your work, right? You do the best you can, you tell the best story. I tried to have an audience in mind, but you know, you don't know a lot of times who your work is going to resonate with and what about it is going to matter to people in different parts are going to matter to different people, and they're going to get what they get out of it. And so, yeah, I think, I don't know, there's something almost leveling or egalitarian about the whole thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, now I would say like comics are mainstream. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
like,
very
at
much.
Kamikaze, I don't think that we're like a super special case in this. That is just like people like wandering in off the street, like just wanting to like check out some comics, or you know, parents who say that their kids only read comics, and it's like, that's fine. Like,
Yes.
The reading.
I think
Yeah, I love the stories about kids that learn to read by reading comics. Reading is reading. There, and I think that more people, more parents and educators are on board with that. And that did not used to be the case in the early days when I started making comics. There would be panels that we would do about people would share their stories about how they, you know, they had difficulty learning how to read. They had difficulty connecting with books that don't have pictures in them, regular books. Yes, prose. And oh my goodness, this brain of mine. And so they would learn to read by reading comics, and that there were certain teachers or people in their life that made them feel like less, or feel like it wasn't really reading, or that, you know, some sort of shame element there. And I think in the last 15 years, a lot of that has changed because the perception of comic books and this pop culture media broadly has changed. I think the zeitgeist is, you know, surrounding comics now. And I think that that's really good for people that are learning to read this way and consume stories. And I don't know. So I think it's really great.
We have like, I don't know, what, like 6 minutes, 7 minutes left. And I have a couple of questions, and there's some questions in the chat.
Yeah, let's do it.
I just want to know, like, would you like to work in any other industry or any other aspect of the comics industry, like editing? Like, would you like to, you know, animate, direct? Is that something that you aspire to, or do you want to just keep doing comics and just like getting new and different jobs? What do you, is it something you've thought of?
For me, I'm pretty set on comics because it's like very rewarding. But part of me also kind of at some point wants to like write a prose novel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was like, I've been like thinking about it. But mostly I want to stay within comics. I kind of want to explore other artistic mediums just for fun, but like comics is the kind of thing where I want to do it repeatedly, and other things I'm like, I want to write a book and like make a screenplay and a movie and an album. Like, okay, I need to focus, but like all the other things are like, I just want to do one of each and see how it is. But comics I'm kind of like all in on, and I'm more like, these are my, oh my God, I have like this Post-it note. This is how many story ideas I have. Each one of these lines is a different story idea. One of them says, make the Watchmen of rom-coms. So in like 10 years, I come out with like the Watchmen of rom-coms.
What? Yeah. Amazing.
Well, my next question is going to be like, what are your, like, you know, your dream jobs, dream projects, dream characters or universes?
Watchmen of rom-com.
Yeah, obviously. I'm pivoting from comics to more long-form graphic novelature. That's where I feel like I'm being called. And so, you know, the things I want to do, the stories I want to explore, and the sort of involve depth of emotion and pushing the art form, and sort of creating. I'm very good at universe creating, and I want to inhabit them for longer. With a deadline book, you gotta go. Like, it's now. And I like the idea that I'll be able to tell stories that can breathe a little bit, and where I can sort of level up my art and my storytelling chops. And so while it's still comics, I think I'm skewing more graphic novelature. And yeah, I also do a bunch of other things. I don't have albums. My dad tells me I can't carry a tune in a bucket, and it's true. So singing is not for me, but like I do sculpture and I carve things, and I make a lot of stuff. And so I have these other avenues. I played D&D, and I made a little health potion. Like, I colored some resin and made little health potions for my group. Anyway, so there's all sorts of little stuff, little crafts that I do. Oh, who's our friend?
Kitty.
She has wanted nothing to do with me all day until this panel.
Hello.
On the stove,
face.
that bookshelf, on that shelf,
face.
entire time.
Look at the face.
Oh my God.
Oh, I love her.
She's great. She's famous on Instagram.
Oh, of course she is. Of course she is.
Oh,
Beatrix would like to know, what was your artistic education like? These are some questions from the chat. Did you go to art school? I think you guys like answered this like a little bit. And how did you start your first art portfolio? This like goes all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
I did not go to art school, nor did I make an art portfolio. So I think at one point, secretly at work, I printed out some things I had drawn, stapled them together, and wrote my phone number on top, and like handed them to people at Comic-Con, and they were like, "What?" I was like, "Here you go."
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, I went
Nothing,
to,
and you don't need anything.
I went to college, but I knew how to draw, and like I felt pretty confident in my art, and I knew art school wasn't it for me. But I wanted to study academia. I wanted to, learn things and explore things I was interested in. So I went to college and studied English and philosophy and history, and got a very liberal education and loved it, and met some of my best friends there. But I created art tangentially. I also studied art there, but it wasn't in art school. I went to educate myself.
Couple more quick
Interesting.
ones. Do you think webcomics are still as big today as, say, 10 years ago? Webcomics in particular.
I just had a conversation the other day about zines. So, yeah, and so I think zines are maybe making a comeback, but I was never really I enjoyed webcomics, but I never created one. So what do you think, Kristen?
I think that there's always going to be webcomics that are like hugely successful, because all it is just an avenue for people to get their comics out there, and it's free. So like there's just like an instant sell there. And it seems like webtoons are super huge right now. Like my cousin was like, she installed webtoons on my phone and then like hearted a bunch of comics and was like, you have to read all of these. I didn't yet, but so like I think that there'll always be like a market for webcomics. I mean, whether it's through your like personal site or like one of those sort of aggregate sites like Webtoons, it's like kind of up to you. For me, I was like, I'll just make my own site. And it's not like my webcomic was like, it didn't like break the internet or anything. It just had like a steady following of nice people who were, I don't know, cool. But
All right.
You don't even need to have a huge webcomic to be a success.
We have 1 minute there, and there's like one question which I think might be kind of easy. Like, do you think crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter should be considered indie publishing or mainstream?
Ooh.
I think it's
honestly, I feel like everyone should just be able to run a Kickstarter, and if someone wants to back it, go for it. If not, I don't think that we should bother controlling what people do on Kickstarter.
Yeah, like so you would say
I
it's
agree.
Still indie, right?
I think it has to be indie. Even if you like Jimmy Palmiotti does this with Amanda Connor a lot. I don't know if they use Kickstarter necessarily, but they'll crowdfund their books, and they have like an imprint where they do all this stuff. And so like they do many of them under this house. I would still consider that indie publishing, but I guess it doesn't really matter. You can think about it in whatever terms you want, I suppose. Yeah, but I love that anybody right now, you out there want to make a story, make your story, right? Make a comic. You can do it at home. You can make a little mini comic. You can publish it on the internet as a web comic, or you can physically make one and hand it out if comic book shows are ever a thing again. I don't know. So maybe just put it on the internet, guys.
Yeah.
That's where everything is.
Yeah. I'm being told we have like another like 5-10 minutes if we want.
Sweet.
If you guys want to like shout out all of your works and know that you can buy any of these, I'm sure from Comikazi, from me, I will put it in your hands. Oftentimes we have signed copies. But yeah, so what's out there right now? What do you got?
Let's see. Mine is LaGuardia, which won the Hugo and the Eisner, which just showed up at lunch today, you guys. Blah, 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 blah. I'd also won the Hugo, but I got an email that said, we have not shipped those yet. So there's that. And then I also did Livewire with Vita Ayala, edited by Heather Antos, which was recently collected into a trade paperback. So that's a little more esoteric.
I loved it.
It was so fun to make, and it's timely, and it's, beautifully written. Vita is an excellent writer, and I did the best art that I could on that book, as I always do. So those are a couple of things that you can get. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I have my book Hench Girl, which don't have near my desk and I'm like plugged into my headphones, but Imagine It's Here. Hench Girl is my first book.
We'll edit it in post.
Yeah,
We'll edit it
just
in.
like
yeah,
someone
right there.
Photoshop
Yeah,
this right
yeah,
here.
right there.
It's about like a
Oh,
there it
we
is.
did it.
And there's actually a new edition of that coming out in like
I think it ships next
4
week.
days. Yeah, it's
Nice.
out like next Wednesday or something. And it has
Nice.
16 extra pages because why not? And I had a lot of fun doing that. That was kind of like my growing up in comics sort of thing. And then I also did Making Friends, which is like a kid's graphic novel about a girl
love
who
it.
All ages. please.
yeah, all
All
ages.
ages.
Everyone basically can read this. But
Everyone
it's kind
does.
of about
I'm
being
sure.
a
Oh, it looks lovely.
Yeah, there's 2 volumes of that. We got it.
here's the other
Oh,
one.
that's lovely.
Yes.
Nice.
And then I also did this Minecraft, all the ones that I'm like working on right now I have at my desk. I have this Minecraft graphic novel that I did. It just came out pretty recently.
I love it.
It was really fun to work on.
It's wild that like Minecraft comics have like they have great stories, they have great artists on there, like the creative teams have been
I
like
didn't even
so
know it was
good.
a thing.
I mean, like, you know, like Minecraft is a thing, but it's like it's so good to just to be able to like, you know, hand a parent or a kid 'cause that's, it's usually like the situation, some just like really just straight up good art. Like I like these artists so pretty.
Oh, I love
it's a good way to trick kids into reading. You're like,
I love that.
It's about your favorite video game.
Yes. Read this book about this game you play. I love that.
And maybe it's not about a dog cop. Dogman is fine, but this is different. You know, there's it's good. It's the
Oh my
best-selling
goodness.
book of all time, I guess. But
Oh my goodness.
Dogman.
Kids literature is just like beyond me. I don't, you know, I used to live around my nieces and nephews and I no longer do. So there are no really children in my life. And so I feel like there's a big gap of like my knowledge about what kids read or are into. Me and my little gay paradise. I'm like, I don't have any kids.
Yeah, well, all right, great. Yeah, like any of those works, you can come get them from Comikazi. And
Yeah, support Comikazi. They're great. You can do curbside pickup. They deliver.
keep them stocked. Yeah, we'll bring it to you. We'll mail it to you. If we sell out, we'll give more. Like that is, that's always the case. And I think, yeah, we're at 149 right now. We just like blew like straight through nap time.
Yeah. We did it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having this conversation. It was so easy and lovely. And
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks so much.
you folks again. Maybe one day we'll be in the same room together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Someday.
Our last
Next year
signing in March. Like
I know you guys were the last human people I saw before I've been locked down. My partner works in a hospital, and so we are really high risk, so we don't see anyone. And you guys were the last human people. I did a book signing at Comikazi because I love them so much, and you guys were the last human people that I saw that like weren't my immediate family.
Wow.
So yeah, I have such fond memories of going places and seeing
It's great.
humans.
We'll make new ones. This is one.
Yes. Hey, good job, you guys, putting this together. This is really nice.
Yeah.